Hello, Christopher Kennedy here with Mastering Color Grading in After Effects, and we're going to look at how to use the Curves tool in Color Finesse 3 on this dark clip. It's called Dark Scene. I'm going to click on the full interface, and normally we work in the RGB tab here, but we're going to go down to Curves, and you can see we have straight lines, not curves. It's called curves because we can introduce curves into these. I'm going to leave the RGB waveform up here because you're used to it by now. You know how it works. And we're not going to work on the red, green and blue at this point because that would overcomplicate things. Let's just stick with the master curve, which controls how bright and dark the image is. Looking at the image, it's obviously very dark, so we want to lighten it. This line represents the light in the image. Down here are the shadows, which you can see because it's very black here. In here are the midtones, and up here are the highlights. So this is just another way of getting hold of parts of your image and changing them. It's a much more intuitive feel, this, which can be good, but it can also lead to mistakes. So I'll show you some easy ways to use this. If you just click on the middle of the line, you've got hold of the midtones. So if I now push that up to the left, and you look at the image, you can see the midtones get brighter. If I drag that down to the right, you can see the midtones get even darker. If you want to reset this, just right click and reset curve. So that's the midtones. If we click down here, we're down towards the shadows. And if I pull that down, the shadows get even darker. You can see there the shadows have just all gone to black. If I push that up to the left, then the shadows lighten so much that we can actually see detail in the image that we never knew was there. Again, I'm going to just reset that curve. And if we get hold of the line up here, we're playing with the highlights. So if we push that up to the left, the highlights in the sky are getting brighter. If we pull that down to the right, we darken those highlights. So you can see the different ways you could control that image. So let's imagine we came to this clip in the usual way. We could go into the RGB tab as we're used to doing and start playing around with brightening the shadows and so forth. That would work, just as we've shown in previous lessons. But a quick solution is just to come in here, look at those shadows, say they're too dark, click on the shadows here, push that up, and you've got your solution. If you scrub through that clip there, you can now see the girl walking across the frame in what was previously just about black. So that can be a good starting point. I'm going to show you how curves can be used in a more conventional scene. This is the clip from earlier. And here I'm going to show you how we would isolate parts of the image. Rather than just clicking in one place and moving one part of the image, you can make 2 points. So if I make 1 point there in the midtones and another point here, if I drag this shadow point, you can see, just watch the line, not the images. You can see the bottom part of this line moves, but the line up here doesn't move at all. It has a slight little movement, but it barely changes. So what I've done there is I've isolated everything below the midtones. So now when I drag that down, if you look at the image, I'm darkening the lower midtones and the shadows by dragging that down. In the same way, if I reset that, I could click around here, and then if I click here and move this point, all I'm doing is affecting the highlights of the image. So you can see there I'm brightening them, there I'm darkening them. Now this means you can pick any part of the image just with a few clicks and change it. The most common use for this is for people to introduce an S-curve. So you put a little click down here near the shadows and drag it down, and a click here near the highlights and drag it up. That creates this sweeping S shape, which, as you can see in the image, is quite close to the final result we got when working in the RGB tab before. It's not perfect. If you look at the waveform, we've not spread out the contrast as much, but it can be a quick solution to getting the look you want. The danger with the Curves tab is that it's very easy to go too far. Although it's intuitive, it makes huge differences very quickly. So if I put that S-curve in as I did before, and then I tried to make an adjustment to the midtones, I've tried to darken them, you can see immediately the image looks like a cartoon. The smallest of movements can destroy an image when you're using the curves tool. So I recommend working with it and experimenting with it and using it to brighten clips that are too dark, and perhaps putting this S-curve in as a starting point, or when you want to work quickly. But until you're really familiar with using it, don't use it as a primary correction tool. It can be great for quick fixes, and later on we can use it very creatively with color, but for now just use it when you occasionally need to get something done first.